A fourth was shot dead by police. Some of the hostages were led out to safety, but for more than 80, the rescue effort had come too late. President Hollande called the attacks an act of war.
We are going to fight, and our fight will be merciless. These terrorists that are capable of such atrocities, they need to know they will be confronted by a France that is determined, united, and acting as one.
Outside the Bataclan Theatre today, they continue to bring out the bodies well into the afternoon. Next to the police cordon, there was evidence of the desperate efforts of medics to save lives. While people are coming, individuals here to lay flowers outside the street that leads to the theatre. And on the pavement, you can still see fresh blood. The police are telling me that there are still bodies inside there. They're still bringing them out. And the emotions here are still incredibly raw. Police are trying to establish the identities of yesterday's attackers. There have been arrests in Belgium. British official sources have told the BBC they believe a Syrian cell was behind the attack. People here are still reeling from the Charlie Hebdo shootings, which happened just around the corner in January.
Ceux qui ont tiré cette nuit, qu'est-ce qu'ils avaient dans la tête? Qu'est-ce qu'on leur a mis dans la tête? Et pourquoi on leur a mis aussi facilement que ça dans la tête? D'où viennent-ils? Ils n'habitent pas dans l'immeuble en face, ils n'habitent pas là. Je n'excuse personne parce que le crime est inexcusable.
Meanwhile, Parisians are going from hospital to hospital looking for missing relatives. Nicolas and his girlfriend went to the concert together. She was shot in the abdomen. She's safe and recovering, but he is haunted by what he saw.
Et quand on s'est retourné, on a vu un mec avec une Kalachnikov et deux mecs qui sont partis un à gauche, un à droite. Et donc là, on a compris que c'était pas une blague, on s'est tous couchés. Donc les uns sur les autres, moi j'avais quelqu'un sur moi, donc qui me protégeait quelque part. Puis là, ils ont commencé à tirer, ils ont fait, c'était pas des fusillades, quoi, c'était pas ta 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 ta, c'était ta 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 ta. C'était en fait ils exécutaient des gens, quoi. C'était horrible psychologiquement de rester couché comme ça, en se disant peut-être dans 2 secondes je suis mort d'une balle dans la tête, quoi. Donc du coup, je me suis levé, je suis sorti. Et c'est là que j'ai vu les premières images en fait du massacre, parce que quand en marchant vers la sortie, j'ai vu 3 mecs morts. Il y en a un qui m'a, enfin je le regardais, c'était horrible, il avait du sang de partout, c'était un mec de mon âge quoi, un t-shirt bleu, voilà, c'était horrible quoi.
The words Bataclan Theatre will be written into one of the darkest chapters of modern French history. The building stands on the Boulevard Voltaire, fittingly perhaps named after the writer whose work embodies the French ideals of secularism and freedom. It is those values, many feel, that came under attack last night.
Armed police patrolled a quiet centre of Paris. The attacks in which 129 people lost their lives have been claimed by the so-called Islamic State. It appears there were just 7 terrorists. But what do we know about them? One man, aged 29, was born in Paris and has previously been involved in petty criminality. Intelligence services reported he was radicalized, but he wasn't known to be part of a terrorist network. Another was born in 1990, wasn't known previously to police, and had a Syrian passport. A Greek minister has said the holder of this passport entered the EU through Greece in October. Belgian media are reporting that 3 of the terrorists were from Brussels. Prosecutors in France didn't confirm this, but said that a black car used in the attack was rented in Belgium. Premises are being searched there tonight, and 3 men have been arrested. Around 1,500 French citizens are said to be fighting in Syria, more than any other Western country. A similar number are said to be being monitored in France by the security services for alleged extremist links. France has one of Europe's largest Muslim populations, and despite previous tensions over issues like the banning of the veil, today Muslims reacted with horror to the attacks.
Don't speak about Islam. Islam, it's got nothing to do with this. We are against what happened. This is not Islam.
People in Paris, I think, can do the difference between a Muslim and a terrorist.
This has been claimed by ISIS, but we need to wait for the results of the investigation to find out what is really the root of this.
Paris is in mourning. Its citizens, Muslim and non-Muslim, are waiting to find out. Did the attackers form their plans here in France? or was it conceived abroad in ISIS strongholds?
People have been coming here to lay flowers all day. The scene of one of the first shootings. Gunmen attacked this bar before crossing the road and opening fire on this Cambodian restaurant, killing at least 12 people. And this terrorist tactic of marauding gunmen moving through a city has been a fear of European security agencies ever since the Mumbai attacks in India.
As with previous attacks, it appears that the killers were on the radar of security agencies.
They know they are dangerous, but the problem is the degree of danger. And then in democracies, you cannot put people in jail just because you suspect them of being dangerous. So the laws will be more repressive in the future, I think not only in France but all over Europe.
One possible opportunity to stop the attackers could have come last week, when a man en route to Paris was arrested in possession of weapons and explosives in Bavaria, although it's not clear he's definitely linked to these attackers. Tonight, police in France and across Europe are racing to find any more of their accomplices.
Secunda Kamani, and clearly what you've heard just there raises many questions. To discuss those security implications is the counter-terrorism expert Dr. Azim El-Difraoui. And Dr. Azim El-Difraoui, thank you for joining us. Just talk to us first about this idea of the one French national, a young man, 29 years old, who is clearly part of a homegrown terror strategy, if we can call it that.
Yeah, we know that there's homegrown terrorism in France. We know that there's homegrown terrorism in England. There's homegrown terrorism in Germany. And the big question is like, why can't we reach these people anymore? Why do they look for a totalitarian ideology? Why don't they feel they can benefit from these countries and achieve another meaning in life than blowing oneself up with the hidden myth of paradise? But then again, jihadism is a global phenomenon by now, and we should really take the global connotations of this ideology into account, in a sense that we don't have a global strategy. We don't even have a European strategy.
Well, let me ask you something. Each country does things slightly differently. Do you think it is worth France asking herself about certain policies or certain implications, for example, the importance of the Republic, you know, not having the sort of religion as your first port of call? Or is it crazy to even assume that these things make any difference?
No, I mean, like, there are local factors which, you know, play into radicalization processes. But obviously the idea to say French is a secular republic is a good idea, which doesn't mean that Islam is going to be excluded. But let me come back to something, you know, at each attack, attacks which were 20 years ago, 11th of September or 15 years ago, we focus on a single attack, attack jihadism as a problem which might go away. The ideology is there for at least 30 years. It was created partly with our help in the war against the Soviets in Afghanistan, and we don't deal with this ideology in a coordinated manner.
What about this idea?
The roots of radicalization.
And what about this idea we were hearing that France or Paris tonight is missing a sense at the moment of national unity, that our guest said he worried that would be eroded by attack after attack. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's one of my biggest fears, that this national unity, which was displayed to some degree after the attacks in January against Charlie Hebdo, and which was summed up by the slogan, "We are all Charlie," is going away. But even at this time, some people felt that they were not Charlie. They were not interested in terrorism, would not support terrorism, but felt left out because they didn't feel that they're part of France, which is Charlie, which would say, well, it's fine to do drawings of the Prophet Muhammad. And the huge risk at this stage is that national unity is going to be eroded, and that's what the so-called Islamic State knows very well. I mean, one of the major purposes of this attack was using a fault line, a division in French society to aggravate polarization, because polarization is the best friend, unfortunately, of radicalization. So the big task will be to avoid polarization of French society, for example, by two repressive security measures.
Azim, thank you very much indeed. Well, Richard Watson has been gathering intelligence on the scale of the ISIS threat now, and you heard what our guest just said about the importance of not overreacting, if you like. But what do you think, Richard, are the implications now for the UK?
I think the implications are quite profound, actually. It's a very, very stark reminder of the threat we faced in the UK, although the terror threat level remains the same, and the police and MI5 will be on high alert in any case. I think if you look at the French situation, my sources are telling me that 10 people per week for the last 5 months have travelled out to Syria, and many will have come back. If we look at the numbers here in the UK, it's quite instructive. These numbers are right up to date. They're from counter-terrorism sources today. 760 people are assessed to have travelled out to Syria. Some 60 people are assessed to have died fighting in Syria. Half of the remainder, about 350 people, are back in the UK already. Now, we already have a de-radicalisation programme in this country called Channel, but I think it's almost impossible for Channel to cope with that level of that number of people. And so I think that the real question here is, how do you prioritise your targets? There are 2,000 people, persons of interest in the UK to MI5, the security service. The question is how. Yeah. The question really is, how do you keep tabs on 2,000 people? Prioritisation is absolutely essential. I also have been talking to someone today about communications technology, and that is also very interesting. If you, I've spoken to someone who's infiltrated something called the Cyber Caliphate, and they've been communicating with secure apps. I've got some of these comms here. He said, one of the ISIS supporters, alleged ISIS supporters, says, "Don't act until you're ready. You wait for the word and you'll go." And he also told me that in the UK right now there's a lot of police action. It's very hot. Bide your time. Wait till it's safe. So this question is very, very serious. If terrorists are going to use secure communications, it's a real threat to the UK.
Mark Urban, yeah. Thanks. Okay, that's right. We're right. Well, the organised scale of this horror has left leaders across the world wondering what comes next, trying to work out the right response to ISIS. What happened here last night will clearly re-energise debate about our own domestic and foreign policy. Here's Mark Urban.
The first blow was a bomb detonating outside the Stade de France as President Hollande watched the France-Germany international. It was followed by 2 more blasts. Even if nothing else had happened, an attack by suicide bombers so close to the French president would have signalled a major event. It couldn't have underlined much more clearly Islamic State's intention to shift its violence towards the far enemy, so-called, and in particular leading countries in the coalition ranged against it.
Sur place étaient découverts 2 corps.
2 bodies were discovered, one of them appearing to be that of a suicide bomber with an explosive belt, batteries, detonator, and a number of metal objects to make the explosion more dangerous.
The attackers wore suicide vests. Charlie Hebdo people didn't. But it's similar to the attack in Beirut on Thursday evening that killed more than 40 people and has also been associated with Islamic State. The use of suicide vests on Western streets suggests a major new challenge for security agencies, and it also suggests a bomb maker was an essential part of this operation. This isn't the first time assault weapons have been used on French streets. Several were seized after the Charlie Hebdo attacks. 9 days ago, a Balkan man bound for Paris was arrested in Bavaria. His car boot was full of automatic weapons and explosives, underlining how relatively easy it is to bring such hardware through Europe.
These weapons, especially the weapons like Kalashnikov, are circulating, are moving within Europe, and the central origin being the Balkans. So we face this problem not only on terrorist situations, but also very much in drug traffic conflicts. So it's a big challenge for us, and I think France has been more accessible to this traffic than other European countries.
Inevitably, people ask, could it happen here? If not in London, maybe Rome or Berlin. In the UK, there have been several major anti-terrorist drills practicing for the so-called Mumbai scenario. Those involved acknowledge a grim truth, though, that no preparations are perfect and that many can die in the minutes before an armed response arrives.
Mark Urban with that report. Well, let's pick up with him now. And Mark, you raised that question yourself, really. Do the events here make authorities think it is more likely to happen at home?
Well, the threat level is high, of course. There's a battery of things they can do to try and mitigate that. And let's not forget, some of those standard types of practice worked last night. So the suicide bomber at the Stade de France was discovered trying to enter and blew himself up before he could get in. The border controls succeeded in netting some suspects. Ultimately, though, intelligence is critical. Intelligence failed on the weapons issue in France. In the UK, counter-terrorist people I speak to say they're confident they have a very good handle on this question of illegal weapons entering this country. But of course, they only have to have one significant slip-up in that, and the same preconditions for that type of attack could be created in the UK.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. Richard Barrett is the former director of global counter-terrorism operations at MI6, and I think we have him on the line now from New York. Richard, thanks for joining us, if you can hear us.
Yes, I can.
What do you think this changes in terms of our strategy or government strategy now towards ISIS or towards terrorism?
Yes, well, I think the security services are going to carry on doing tomorrow and today, of course, what they've been doing for many months and many years up till now, and that is having a look at all those 2,000 people that were mentioned earlier as being people of concern, to see which ones should be of most concern, because clearly you can't deal with those fantastic numbers. And I think that the attacks in Paris will perhaps provide some useful analysis, looking at those individuals, what their trajectory was to arrive on the streets of Paris with delivering such murder and mayhem, who they met, when they met them, how that network formed and so on, whether they're associated with the Islamic State, has been said by President Hollande, or whether they're more a self-mobilizing cell, whether they're returnees, and so on. And all these things, I think, will help the security services decide, okay, we should devote more resources to this person, perhaps less to that. But it's a very difficult judgment to make, of course.
And when you hear, for example, that one of these men was known to police, he was known as a radical, arrested 8 times but never imprisoned, does that sound like the system's gone wrong?
I don't think so. You know, an awful lot of people are known to the police for petty crime, and a lot of those people are also fairly radicalized. You can think back to the Lee Rigby murder, for example. Both those people were known to the police for petty crime and, to a certain extent, for radicalization. So, you know, they're not unique by any means, and it is really, really difficult to say, okay, in this case we will really focus on these people, though, of course, it could be an indicator that something may be going on. But I think that there are two issues here. First, there's the... carry on.
I was going to say, people will be looking for reassurance at home, saying, oh, we do things slightly differently in London, or it's a different approach, a different strategy. Presumably, you can't give anyone that reassurance, can you?
Well, no, and I don't think anyone pretends that reassurance is real. I think the level of threat in London is probably at severe, which is just below the top level, you know, and that speaks for itself. In Paris, of course, there have been more threats. I mean, there are more threats to France than to the United Kingdom, but that by no means means there are no threats to the United Kingdom. We have about 1,500...
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Fine.
Well, no one expected to see attacks here on the same city twice in 1 year. We were here in January after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and what's striking is how we tried to make sense of them then. Was it, we asked, about press freedom? Was it about satire? Was it about causing offence? The answer, in the light of what's happened here now, is clearly no. This is a war on all our culture and all our countries, and it almost certainly won't end here in France. But from all of us here, Good night.